Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is AS, and welcome to my YouTube channel. While we are not still done with 2022, it is safe to say that one of the games that will be in the discussion for the Game Awards Best Video Game of 2022 is Elden Ring. Developed by From Software and published by Bandai Namco, Elden Ring took the concepts that have made games in its genre so popular and placed them in an open-world environment, where three things are about to happen. Number one, you'll be awestruck by the visuals and audio design. Number two, you will uncover many secrets. Number three, you will die. A lot.
But at the same time, I do want to explore a little bit.
Interestingly enough, these three aspects are what have made Souls-based games like Bloodborne and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice incredibly popular. My experience has been different, for better or worse. As my viewers on Twitch will tell you, I've always had several grievances with the From Software titles. Prior to Elden Ring's release, I tested the waters with Bloodborne and Sekiro, both of which resulted in, I'll be honest, rage quits very early on in the games. However, seeing Elden Ring's praise, both by critics and users alike, I decided to sit down and answer the following question once and for all. Are From Software games for me? The short answer is no. The long answer will be the video that you're about to watch. Before we begin, I would like to make a few points abundantly clear. First, I played every Souls game, including Demon's Souls Remake, Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring. The shortest runtime was 30 minutes for Demon's Souls Remake, and the longest time was 20 hours for Elden Ring. I have not beaten any of them. I'm essentially a novice who wants to like these games, so please keep that perspective in mind. Secondly, it should be clear by now that I will provide criticism against these games. I would encourage you to thoroughly listen to my reasonings prior to voicing your thoughts, especially with one in particular that leads to anger and ire by die-hard From Software fans. Thirdly, the following opinions do not serve as reviews of the titles because I believe you must beat a game before reviewing it. Lastly, my stance on From Software games is entirely subjective and does not constitute as fact. Whether you agree or disagree with me, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment section. I would like to ask that you keep it civilized, since I know that a conversation about From Software that does not completely paint them in a positive light can quickly go south. Without further ado, let's discuss why From Software games are not for me. I will devote a lot of time in this video to talk about my personal feelings on the genre. However, I would like to start by focusing on others' thoughts on titles such as Elden Ring and Demon's Souls Remake. Therefore, the question that we must ask ourselves is as follows. What makes these games appealing? After speaking with people who are fans of these games, I narrowed my observations to 5 major key points. Let's dive into them. Point number 1, overcoming insurmountable odds. If you ask anyone who is familiar with these games to share a common characteristic, it will be the difficulty. Compared to other games in the market that cater to a larger audience such as Call of Duty, Mario, and Forza Horizon, the From Software titles are not a cakewalk. They require every newcomer and veteran player to spend a good chunk of time while learning the title's mechanics, studying bosses' patterns, and discovering the tools that will mold the experience to fit their playstyle. Achieving these 3 goals is a challenge, but it is this obstacle that has been an attention getter for the die-hard community. The killing blow on a boss after fighting him or her for hours and hours lead to a sense of reward and satisfaction. Succeeding in a situation with a low probability of survival typically leads to a sigh of relief, and this reaction is felt time and time again in the From Software games. Point number 2, particular design. In terms of presentation, it is possible to argue that From Software is on the mountaintop of gaming. While it does not exist throughout most of the title, the music is absolutely sublime during boss battles and the sprinkled cutscenes. Your face can be shoved to the ground by the enemy over and over again, but the music could be the leading factor as to why you decide to metaphorically bang your head against the wall until you succeed. As far as visuals are concerned, the world and the enemies are second to none. Every corner of every inch of the map is filled with important items, grand structures that give hints of the world's history, strategic positions for yourselves and the enemies, and secrets to uncover. It is especially the case with Elden Ring, which has the only open world environment in the series. Although the level layout is quite impressive, the artistic composition of the enemies is even more so. Excluding animations that will be discussed later, the designs of the enemies, both regular and grand bosses, are wonderful. Whether they pay tribute to Asian cultures in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, or abide by the purpose of scaring you in Bloodborne, it is clear that every enemy is menacing, and you would not want to mess with them if you were inside the shoes of the protagonist. Point number 3. The lore. I'm going to keep this part short because it is one of my biggest pet peeves in these games. However, I've watched multiple videos on YouTube that explain the reasons behind the hero's journey, and it is clear that every single boss and every single location has a plot behind them. I would like to avoid spoilers, but I would also like to give an example, and this time it is Sif from Dark Souls. He's a wolf that carries his former master's sword, and his mission is to prevent others from suffering the same fate as his deceased lord. It is such a cool concept, and I would not criticize anyone for admiring the wolf's destiny. Point number 4. Figuring out the right combinations. Aside from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, the majority of From Software games give you the chance to choose a class at the beginning of the game. These different social statuses focus on a specific playstyle, but the titles do not tell you outright how to match the class with the desired playstyle. Nevertheless, you earn a sense of fulfillment whenever you find the perfect build that allows you to play the way you want to play the game. Iron Pineapple on YouTube created a video for gamers who wish to play the part of a mage in Elden Ring. If you follow all the steps, you will become a fearsome wizard in the same veins as Lord Voldemort from Harry Potter. If I did not watch his video, I would have never been able to uncover the steps. Needless to say, it felt pretty great when I completed the final touches of the build and transformed into a mage with which you do not want to mess. Point number 5. Player versus player combat. The feeling of not knowing what is around every corner is one of the strongest highlights for many From Software fans. However, the computerized AI can be exploited once you learn their patterns. The same cannot be said when you play against human opponents. It is the type of unpredictability that you experience when you play multiplayer games in general, such as Mortal Kombat 11, Splatoon, and Gears of War. You may partake in stressful situations when you are matched with someone who is clearly over your level and destroys you within 2 shots. You may encounter an opponent who is obviously under your level and does not pose a threat. Every player versus player encounter in a From Software game rewards the winner with the most powerful sense of satisfaction, and I somewhat envy the players who are skilled enough to win those deadly bouts. All of those points are valid, and every From Software game that I've played delivers on those praise features. Elden Ring is regarded by many players as the best title in the series of challenging video games, and it implements the aforementioned points without missing a step. Now that we have covered others' opinions on Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, Demon Souls Remake, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, I would like to shift gears and talk about my thoughts on those games. I will start by discussing impressions that apply to most or all of those games, and then closely zoom in on each member of the From Software family and talk about what makes them unique, for better or worse. I would like to think that from here on out, there will be moments when From Software will not be displayed in the most positive light. Remember that what you are watching is primarily subjective, and feel free to disagree with anything I have to say. With that out of the way, it is time to dive into my impressions of the From Software games, and we will start with the best part. Visuals and audio design. There is not much to say beyond pointing out my complete agreement with the second previously stated point about why people like From Software games. The environments are beautifully drawn out, the enemy designs are neat, and the music is superb across the board. In addition, the voice acting is calm and direct.
But then there was fire. And with fire came disparity. Heat and cold. Life and death. And of course, light and dark.
If I had to give a score to the visuals and audio design in the From Software games that I've played, I would have no issues with awarding them a 10 out of 10. Gameplay. Outside of the well-known difficulty, the From Software games play like typical third-person action role-playing titles. You create a character, venture out on your quest, and defeat monsters. In most cases, there is a nice array of classes that cater to different builds. You can be a melee fighter, a long-range warrior, or a magic-dependent magician. Sadly, I must bring up my first criticism of these games. When you're at the class selection screen of any of those games, none of the classes are explained to you. The noticeable differences at that instance are the starting weapons and the different stats, but I wish that there would have been a better in-game explanation that could have made each class unique from the get-go. Speaking of the stats, you will have to start the game and go to the character screen to receive more details about the purpose behind each stat. This clarification could have been used at the character selection screen, but it is not a major issue. The stats that your character possesses can be upgraded in addition to the weapons themselves. With the exception of health, mana, which is used to cast magic, and stamina, the spending of experience points in the stats do not make much of a difference, unless you overload the stat with experience points. Strength is the stat that is used to increase weapon-based damage. Nonetheless, I noticed a more substantial improvement when I earned a better weapon, as opposed to the hours of grinding that I did to boost the number of points in the strength category. It doesn't help the game situation when the amount of experience points is over the top in correlation to your level. That is the case with most role-playing games, including the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim and Pokemon Soul Silver, but the added difficulty in the From Software games is a tough sell for gamers who do not mind the process of grinding levels. The necessary grinding is a personal issue for me. Unless you are an absolute beast in Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, or Bloodborne, grinding is practically required. The only exceptions are Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and Elden Ring. Grinding in general does not exist in the former, because the leveling system in Sekiro is solely geared towards acquiring additional skills. You can upgrade your health and attack power, but they rely on collectible items as opposed to experience points. If you want to beat Sekiro, you must master its parry system and practice until you make it. As far as the latter is concerned, you can make the case that you do not have to grind because of the open world. If you confront Margit at the beginning of the game and she kicks your butt, you can explore the other parts of the world and come back to her. This route will give you the option to fight other enemies, naturally level up, and increase your stats. Unfortunately, this road can lead you to an even more frustrating situation. I found a fantastic grinding spot early in Elden Ring, which asked me to go through a portal and fight a series of monsters over and over again. As soon as I started to attack the regular enemies in that level, I discovered something. When I fought Margit, she was beating me, but I knew that I was almost on her playing field. The basic enemies on the other side of the portal would kill me in one shot, undeniably stating that the infested environment was not suited for me at the time. I could have discovered the portal while traveling around the world and fighting monstrous foes in preparation for Margit. Had I not known there was a good farming spot for experience points, I would have preferred another confrontation with the first major boss of Elden Ring. So, what happens when you die? If you're beaten by anything besides a boss, you lose all of your experience points, return to the latest checkpoint that you discover across the map, and have the opportunity to return to the area where you died, retrieve your souls, and continue on your merry way. If you meet your demise prior to retrieving your lost experience points, they are gone forever. The same post-death process applies to your failures to defeat a boss, but there is a catch. If a base foe defeats you, it is possible to get your souls back and simply run in the other direction. You have a chance to escape intact without further combat. If a boss kills you, then you must fight him or her over and over again if you want to get your hands on the lost souls. You are stuck on this boss fight until you either give up or beat him or her. It is a nuisance for sure, and an easy fix could have been implemented if the souls waited for you outside of the fog doors that typically lead you back to the enormous or powerful enemy. Despite your lack of skill or thick set of skills,
I don't discriminate against no body types, okay, sisters out there, okay? And for this, I am not going to discriminate because this, she's been eating good. This thing right here has been eating really good, okay?
You will die at some point in the game. Thankfully, there are a couple of mechanics that can improve your chance of survival, aside from grinding. On one hand, there are hints on the ground from developers and human players. You can also place those hints for other players. It creates an online community, similar to the world building of Death Stranding. Unlike Death Stranding though, there will be several human-made hints that are designed to further frustrate you. You may walk towards a ledge that has a sign telling you to jump. An unsuspected player can consider it as Bible and jump, only to fall to their death. I've not seen many comments by trolls throughout my time with the From Software games, but their existence is surely a thorn in my side.
Alright, now what the fuck is that? Someone left a message right there on the fucking... I gotta check it out. I mean, I'm in New Lando. It's all ghosts, all bullshit. I'm checking it out. I don't give a shit. I'm doing it. Try jumping. Fuck you. Try jumping. And I will take this jump for the team at great sacrifice. Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, I know what I did. I know I died. And the guy who wrote that fucking sign knows that I was going to also. And that is my point.
On the other hand, you can roll out of the way from enemies' attacks, block them, and parry them. All of those defensive techniques consume stamina, which is expected. However, what was not expected during my time with Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and the other games was the incredibly tedious and sometimes broken nature of the parry system. In the majority of these games, there is a delay of a handful of milliseconds with your parry. Other games with the parry system like Nioh Automata allow you to wait for the very last moment and parry an attack. In Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring, you need to know exactly what attack the enemy will do and press the parry button about a second before the enemy connects. I'm sure that a lot of gamers have mastered those systems. I have not, because I do not have the patience to deal with a delayed mechanic. As a result, I stopped using it entirely, which eliminated a defensive strategy that could have been amazing if the timing was instantaneous. There's one more piece of contention that I would like to bring to the table before we discuss the structure of From Software's storytelling. It relates to the video that guides newcomers to the acquisition of a powerful magic-based build. My rule of thumb for video games is as follows. If you need a guide to figure out where to go or how to do something, it is inevitable that the developers and I will have a disagreement on their product's design. The only genre that gets a pass from me consists of puzzle titles, but that type of games also has its painful examples like the Talos Principle and The Witness. All in all, I should not be on the lookout for a guide to figure out what to do to progress through the main story of a title that does not have puzzles at its centerpiece. Take it as you will. In the meantime, I think it would be a good idea to switch over to the next aspect of From Software games that deserve our laser-focused recognition. Story. I believe that I said it in other videos on my channel, but allow me to reiterate an important piece of information. When it comes to video games, the story is their most impactful feature for me. Regardless of if I play a first-person shooter like Bioshock Infinite, a third-person shooter like Uncharted 4: A Thief's End, or an action game like Asura's Wrath, titles nowadays need to explain why I'm risking my fictional life in a clear and engaging way. If I do not understand the main objectives, I lose interest in the entire experience. If I do not connect to the main character, I have no reason to root for him or her in his or her attempt to beat the odds. It is here where I will voice one of my two most controversial comments about the From Software games. From my standpoint, every title that I played from the company in question fails on both accounts. They do not directly explain the main objectives, and my connection to the protagonist is non-existent. Allow me to explain. None of the From Software games consistently tell you about your objectives in an engaging way. I will give you an example. In Elden Ring, I know that I'm supposed to defeat bosses and become the Elden Lord. Based on the 20+ hours that I spent with the title and excluding the research that I did for this video, I cannot tell you about the meaning behind the term Elden Lord, the different characterizations of the bosses, and the reason as to why I, of all the other humans in the created world of Elden Ring, was chosen to beat the lurking evil. The lack of a traditional narrative is a major concern that was brought up in the conversations that I had with my peers, and I've been told that I had to, quote-unquote, look for the story.
Boy, if you don't...
The need to look for the story crushes any interest I have in the lore. Having a game hold my hand when it comes to the gameplay is one thing. Having a game hide the protagonist's purpose within From Software's worlds is another, and one that, for me, creates a sense of boredom extremely quickly. I need a reason for my actions. Titles like Minecraft and Goat Simulator release you to the wild with zero guidance, and I cannot stand them. From Software titles are not as loosey-goosey with your freedom as those two games, but I cannot invest myself in the environments and justify the negative emotions that I feel, while perpetually being disconnected with the game because the story is poorly delivered. When you do find pieces of the lore, you have to read them. I will be 100% transparent with you guys, as I have been throughout all of my videos. If I need to read text in a video game to make any sense of its lore, I may as well read a book. You can make the case that titles in the past like Final Fantasy VI and Earthbound force you to read and you will be factually correct. Nevertheless, we are in 2022, and I expect any parts in my role-playing games that emphasize the title's lore to include voice acting. Do not think that I'm only picking on From Software games in this regard. Here are two more examples. First, you have 2014's Destiny. Yes, it does include voice-acted cutscenes. However, the story is so convoluted and generic to the point that you need to use the game's encyclopedia online in order to get a general idea of what you experienced by the time the credits are over. Many of the game's lore is in the encyclopedia, which is completely unacceptable. The other example is Pokemon Scarlet. The game is not out, so I cannot be too harsh on the title. However, the trailers that have been shown so far indicate a huge issue that has become a persistent problem with the franchise. There is no voice acting in the game whatsoever. I understand why Pokemon Yellow in 1998 on the Game Boy did not have voice acting. With games such as Astral Chain and No More Heroes 3 on the Nintendo Switch that indeed include voice acting, why is there no voice acting in the newest Pokemon titles? Their absence in From Software titles is a predicament. Their non-appearance in the Pokemon games is more of an indication of laziness. The point here is that From Software's insistence on asking the players to find the narrative for themselves and refusal to include meaningful voice acting in text-based documents detach me from a narrative that is unquestionably interesting, but one that I do not have a desire to exert effort into understanding it. Every personal comment that I made up to this point has been present in most, if not all, From Software's catalog of games. With that being said, there are positive and negative aspects that only apply to one or two of their titles. Therefore, I would like to continue with my dissection of From Software's mechanics, but in a more specific way. In order for me to do it, I will start with my most favorite title in the franchise and end with my least favorite entry. Keep in mind that I have not beaten any of these games. As of now, we will start with the title that, in my opinion, stands head and shoulders above its competitors within the From Software umbrella. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice may be the hardest game in the series due to the inability to be overpowered through leveling up, but it is my favorite title in the franchise. The gameplay is simplistic yet extremely rewarding. You can only use a single weapon, a few pieces of equipment, and a few skills that are the only reason to do any grinding at all. The stamina meter does not exist. Instead, you have a stand speeder at the bottom of the screen. Both of its ends go in the opposite direction the more you play defense. And once you reach a stopping point, you can no longer defend for a short period of time, and you become very open to incoming attacks. Speaking of defense, Sekiro is the only title that implements an immediate parrying system. It works wonderfully, and it should because it is the trick for success. You still have to learn enemy patterns, but parrying in Sekiro alleviates any worry that you may have about stands being broken. Lastly, the story is pretty grounded, despite the inclusion of fictional monsters. If you played Ghost of Tsushima, you would understand the long-term goal of the protagonist. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is not for the faint of heart, but it is one of the only From Software games that may get a second try from me down the road. The most recent title from the developers, and the one that encouraged me to create this video, Elden Ring has been said to be the most accessible title in the series. I will say that it certainly has the most gameplay options than any other From Software title. There is a plethora of weapons, power-ups, and classes. These include Ashes of War, which are powerful attacks that can be discovered in the world and added to your arsenal, and summons. The latter has existed in the past when you could ask your friends to join your session and play cooperatively, but the summons in Elden Ring refer to AI-based companions, These allies can be leveled up and, at max level, can serve as formidable enemies to your own. Since I'm in the process of praising Elden Ring, I will add one more compliment. Elden Ring has some of the best boss designs I have seen in a very long time. Even though I did not get the chance to fight him, I was enamored by Radahn, especially his entrance during the second phase. My jaw dropped to the floor, it was so cool. Regrettably, Elden Ring was not all sunshine and rainbows for me. There are two problems, outside of the previously mentioned ones about the whole series, that made the game less enjoyable than Sekiro. On one hand, the open world design for Elden Ring can be annoying because you're generally not aware of what you're supposed to do or where you're supposed to go. I've been told that you can use the Sites of Grace to give you a hint on your destination, but I wish that there would have always been a point on the overall map that told me, hey, go here if you want to continue the main plot. World traversal is not all bad though. You do get a horse. However, you still experience the issue of a lack of direction, as well as the probability that you may venture off the beaten path and go into an area that is not meant for your level at the time. On the other hand, a lot of the bosses in Elden Ring counteract the way that you defeat bosses in other From Software games. Whereas the fluidity of attacks in other games is consistent and there is a beat that you can follow to dodge appropriately, some bosses are aware of that convenient pattern and decide to go against it. Look no further than Margit for an example. Margit oftentimes starts the swinging animation, waits a second, and then attacks. Think about a race that you had in elementary school. Your PE teacher would cue you by saying 3, 2, 1, go. What if she switches it up by saying 3, 2, 1.5, 1, go? It is not too bad, but it would throw you off, right? It is my exact feeling in Elden Ring. The tendency of bosses to not follow the typical From Software norm do not stop me from being amazed by them and admiring the overall design of Elden Ring, but it just adds to the overall frustration. One of my Twitch viewers is a diehard fan of From Software. When I came up with the idea for this video, I asked him to name the From Software game that would be a great starting point for people who want to get into the series. Dark Souls 3 was his response, and after I played it for several hours, I wholeheartedly agree with him. It is still a challenging title, but it is not too bad compared to Bloodborne or Sekiro. The bosses can be very fast, and yet they are manageable. I made the most advancements in this game than any other From Software game. The only reason why I have more hours in Elden Ring was because I grinded through a good chunk of it. It appears to be that I have nothing but praise for this game. In this case, what happened? Why did I not finish it? Honestly, it was because I got bored. Dark Souls 3 still suffers from a lack of a direct story, and I was discouraged because I had no idea what the heck was happening around me, nor was I aware of the plot as a whole. I dropped the game at some point and continued to tackle the rest of my backlog. It is a harsh comment, but Dark Souls Remastered to me is the average From Software experience. It suffers from the general issues, but it has not done anything in my playthrough that is worthy of further investigation. It is not amazing, but it is not terrible either. Let's move on. If you're looking for a From Software title that has horror elements in it, look no further than Bloodborne. The atmosphere on display here is incredible. It reminds me of Van Helsing in many aspects. The enemies are terrifying, the bosses are even more so, and the environmental design maintains your level of tension throughout the entire experience. There's more emphasis on horror here than any other From Software title. Furthermore, the game favors a more offensive playstyle than the usual balance of offense and defense. You cannot block in Bloodborne. It does not mean that your only course of action in a fight involves a stream of attacks. You can roll away from enemies, and you can parry. Unfortunately, the parry system borrows the delay that other titles in the franchise have illustrated prior to Bloodborne's release. It may be completely my fault, but I also noticed that there are times when the parry system does not work properly. I fought against the second boss in Bloodborne. There were several moments when I know that I parried at the right time, but his attacks went through it. My assumption is that the attack that crashed my attempt to parry was an offensive move that could not be parried, similar to how an enemy's motion cannot be countered in Batman Arkham Knight if there is a red marker above their head. If that is the reason for my inability to parry the second boss of Bloodborne, then the solution would be the implementation of a color system, which would tell you which attacks can be parried and which attacks cannot be parried. It is wishful thinking, I know, but I would have been more inclined to play through Bloodborne in that manner. I admire its presentation as usual, but the questionable parry system makes the mechanic and the game as a whole very tiresome. I should not be on From Software's case too hard here because, at the end of the day, Demon's Souls was their first foray into the challenging yet rewarding type of video games. I will start with some positive aspects. The remake is the most graphically impressive Souls game I have ever played. But it is here where the positive aspects end. The gameplay feels sluggish, but it is not the biggest problem. The bigger issue at hand is the distance between bonfires. It may not play a factor later on in the game, and I could have very well missed it. But the gap between the first two bonfires in the first area of the game, the castle, is ridiculous. It creates a situation where death prior to the second bonfire forces you to sigh, due to the realization that you must play another 20 plus minutes of gameplay until you can save your progress again. I deleted the game after my first attempt, but I reinstalled it and tried again. When it happened again, I uninstalled Demon's Souls Remake from my hard drive and decided to not touch the game for a very long time, if not ever. Demon's Souls is the first Souls game from the very well-known company, but I would lie if I say that it is anywhere near the quality of the titles that superseded it. Up until the day I decided to record the audio for this video, I was not planning on covering Dark Souls 2. However, I saw that it was on sale for $10 on the PlayStation Store, and I decided to pick it up. It did not take longer than an hour before I realized that I made a mistake. Dark Souls 2 is the most directionless and tedious title in the Dark Souls trilogy. The combination of enemies that are on your case early on in the game, the inability to figure out where to go to progress the story without trial and error, and a few enemies in the first portion of the title that take you out of commission with a single hit are, as people on the internet would like to say, toxic.
Why am I poisoned? Why am I toxic?
It also does not help that your health meter is decreased every time you die. I will suffer through Demon's Souls Remake because the pacing of regular enemies' difficulty is serviceable. The only way I will ever go back to Dark Souls 2 is when Scalebound makes a comeback on Xbox. The From Software games ace what they are trying to accomplish. If you're looking for a title that has a rich lore, exceptional presentation, and gameplay that is challenging yet fair with enough perseverance, any pick from the company's catalog would quench your thirst. Trust me when I say that I want to love these games. Nonetheless, I hope that my concerns have explained to you why I cannot put myself through them at this moment in time. Thankfully, there's a silver lining. The Souls games have become incredibly popular over the years, and one of the outcomes was the creation of a subgenre called Souls-like games. These titles are not made by From Software, but they include common elements while also adding their own spice to the mix. I have played several of them in the past, and as part of the research for this video, I would like to highlight 4 titles. These games may be considered niche compared to the titles such as Dark Souls and Elden Ring, but they have gameplay mechanics that could make my experience with From Software's catalog much better. We will start with the game that resembles From Software's games the most and proceed from there. Nioh. Think about Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, but with multiple weapons. Coming from the same makers as Ninja Gaiden, Nioh certainly takes several inspirations from the series that stars Ryu Hayabusa. Fast-paced combat? Check. Relentless enemies? Check. Powerful bosses? Check and check. I'm not skilled enough, nor do I have the patience to complete Nioh. With that being said, I wanted to display Nioh in a positive light here due to a single reason: the parry system. Unlike the From Software games that are not named Sekiro, the ability to parry here happens immediately upon the press of the appropriate button. It is refreshing and it lessens the types of excuses you make upon failure, besides blaming yourself. If you ever wondered what a Ninja Gaiden game would be if it was co-developed with From Software, Nioh is the game for you. Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma overall is not a difficult game. It includes a difficulty setting, recommended levels for quests, and pacing that nicely introduces harder and harder foes. In that case, why am I discussing the game here? There are two reasons. On one hand, the gameplay is more engaging and fun than a typical From Software title, from me, due to more physical interactions with the bosses. You can fight a griffin, climb on him as he takes flight, and pummel him until he falls from the sky like a shooting star. It is simply fantastic. On the other hand, the switch between daytime and nighttime easily tells you that the enemies in the latter time frame will be harder than the monsters in the former time frame. It is similar to the mechanic that is displayed in Dying Light. In both titles, you are free to explore the environments to your heart's content, or until the game tells you that it is time. Once the sun goes down or up, you understand that you are putting yourself at risk or away from danger. In From Software games, you can enter a random room and an enemy would jump at you and kill your character. Yes, you know from that moment that the foe will be there, but it is irritating. It is further bothersome when you are on the last sliver of health and you die before you can find the next bonfire. Enemies during Dragon's Dogma's nighttime can be difficult at first, but the difficulty setting helps with easing the pain. Titan Souls. Think of Titan Souls as a top-down version of Dark Souls, minus the enemies that infest the nicely designed lands. You must defeat several opponents in Titan Souls, but they solely constitute as bosses. In other words, this exceptional indie game is a boss rush experience. Once you defeat all of them, the game is over. Outside of the stellar design and the engaging battle music, I wanted to include Titan Souls here because of an idea that is at the game's cornerstone. Challenging yet fair. You can say the same about any From Software game, but it is even more apparent in Titan Souls. Here is why. Both you and the bosses are on the exact same playing field. If you get hit once, you are dead. You may have to hit a boss several times to reach a vital organ, but a single hit on the target and it is a wrap. The boss is done. Furthermore, Titan Souls also includes a hard difficulty setting, where the enemies' attacks are faster, and some of them earn other alterations that benefit themselves or the environment. Titan Souls is not an easy game, but the fact that a single shot takes both you and the bosses out of commission encourages me to keep trying, as opposed to bosses in From Software games that are already challenging and yet can take a substantial amount of time to take down if you are not overly prepared. Blasphemous. Blasphemous is easily my favorite Souls-based experience as of the recording of this video. It is not made by From Software, but it is an indie darling that provides a similar sense of dread with its environments, the soundtrack, the visuals, and the boss fights. In fact, there are some larger enemies that could be the lead casting choice in a given person's nightmare. Why do I like Blasphemous so much? First, you do not lose your souls upon death. Instead, you lose a chunk of your mana meter and the amount of souls or tears that you earn by defeating enemies is decreased. You can remedy it by returning to the location of your death and retrieving your tears, but you do not have to do it. The consequences for death are not nearly as harsh as a few games by From Software, and you can always find this particular statue that will allow you to pay a certain number of tears and reverse the negative impact of your death. Secondly, the 2D environments lessen the difficulty for me because you do not have to worry about areas that are not visible on camera at a given moment. It is not a massive point in Blasphemous' favor, but it is one that made my experience much tolerable. Finally, the parry system is on point, similar to how it is implemented in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and Nioh. In the end, I still believe that Dark Souls 3 is the best introduction for individuals who want to take a gander at the series, but Blasphemous is the next best thing, or perhaps a good alternative. I am fully aware that the inclusion of some of the suggested gameplay mechanics would fundamentally change the structure of From Software's games. It is why I do not expect the company to use them in future entries. Even so, there is one small change that, in my opinion, would only expand the reach of these games to a wider audience. It is an adjustment that has been considered as blasphemy by die-hard fans, and one that has received the ire of its naysayers: a difficulty setting.
Let's go get this son of a bitch.
Before you bombard this video with dislikes by the mere mention of that phrase, allow me to make the following statement. With enough determination, patience, and practice, the difficulty of From Software games is fair. If you can learn the enemy's patterns, you will have a better time with the combat systems than those who cannot. With those small prints out of the way, it is time to have a conversation about why I think a difficulty setting could only benefit the company that has created its own genre. Many of the staunch From Software defenders have come out and said that the inclusion of a difficulty setting would ruin the team's vision and the games themselves. Some also say that From Software would need to create two versions of the games for two different demographics of gamers. Ultimately, every developer is entitled to craft their product however they so choose, and I'm not going to lose sleep if the next From Software game does not have a difficulty setting. As a matter of fact, the creator himself and From Software president Hidetaka Miyazaki came out and enforced the notion that a difficulty setting in a From Software game is unlikely. He said, and I quote, "We don't want to include difficulty selection because we want to bring everyone to the same level of discussion and the same level of enjoyment. So, we want everyone to first face the challenge and to overcome it in some way that suits them as a player." I do not expect a difficulty setting in any of their games down the road. However, do I think that the inclusion of a difficulty setting is impossible or would ruin their vision? Absolutely not. Why? It is because there have been hard games in the past that have not been from the company in question, but included a feature that made the title easier for the player, whether it is a traditional difficulty setting, a toggle choice in the options menu, or something else. With that being said, I would like to talk about 7 games. Depending on how you play them, they can be grueling and punishing. Fortunately, they give you the ability to take away some of the stress from your experience. It would be too much to ask From Software to utilize some of these design mechanics, but I think it is vital to understand that, as long as it is done correctly, every game can administer a difficulty setting. Let us begin. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. The game that is most reminiscent of From Software's catalog from the upcoming list, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is a fantastic title, and I absolutely cannot wait for the sequel. In this situation, the game has 4 different difficulty settings: Story Mode, Jedi Knight, Jedi Master, and Jedi Grandmaster. If you choose one of the harder difficulties, the enemies are more aggressive, you receive more damage, and you have less time to parry. You already know what to expect from the easier settings. The enemies deal less damage, your attacks are stronger, and you have more time to parry. Jedi Fallen Order offers the From Software experience through its Grandmaster difficulty setting, but it also gives players a chance to force the enemies to take a chill pill. Darksiders 3. Darksiders 3's combat is a combination of God of War and Dark Souls. It also offers difficulty settings, and the differences are practically identical to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. The higher the setting, the enemies will have more health, they will deal more damage, and your window to dodge and parry will be shortened. Unlike Fallen Order though, Darksiders 3 also includes an option to make the game an even harder title. After you choose a difficulty setting, the game will ask you if you would like to play Darksiders 3 on Nightmare mode. If you accept the challenge, your save file will be deleted if your character dies. I cannot imagine enabling that option here, and especially in a From Software game. Nonetheless, the implementation of this difficulty setting and Nightmare mode in a From Software game will not only provide the desired easy mode, but it will also award hardcore players with the option to further challenge their gaming skills. Diablo 3. Diablo 3 is not necessarily a challenging title. The easy mode in this game makes it practically impossible for you to die. I spent about 300 hours in Diablo 3. I would love to earn the Platinum Trophy again, but I need to reach level 60 with more than 5 characters. Whenever I return to the game, I will have to start a new character on hard mode. Its hard mode is normal mode in any other action-based game. I'm getting carried away a little bit. In general, the differences in the title's difficulty settings affect the damage from enemies, the damage done to said enemies, your money, and your experience points. You take more damage and deal even less damage on the higher difficulties, but you gain more money and more experience points at the same time. There is a return to your investment on the harder difficulties, which is why I do not mind the extra challenge. Sifu. My second favorite game of the year as of right now, Sifu is an exceptional game. It did not have a difficulty setting at launch, and it kicked butts across the world. Thankfully, the combat system is rewarding and addicting, so I powered through and beat the title. Several weeks ago, the developers behind Sifu decided to release a patch that adds an easy mode and a hard mode. If you go on the less intensive path, the enemies do less damage to you, and they are generally less aggressive. They will not attempt to attack you at the same time, which reminded me of the enemy AI from the older Assassin's Creed titles. If you're looking for gaming obstacles, go to the other side of the spectrum. As soon as you play in hard mode, you will immediately notice the added changes. You deal less damage. Enemies deal more damage to you. They are much more aggressive. Moreover, the bosses have new patterns that you have never seen prior to playing Sifu on the hard difficulty setting. The major patch for Sifu made a stellar game even better by asking newcomers to give it a try through its easy mode, while daring seasoned players to beat it on its hard mode. Hades. Hades may be the best roguelike game I have ever played in my life. Great soundtrack, beautifully written characters, and gameplay that is impactful and precise. So, what does Hades do to decrease the number of times that your character dies? It introduces God mode, which can be toggled on and off in the options menu. At first, it decreases the damage from enemies by 20%. Every time you die, it adds an additional 2%, and it maxes out at 80%. This mechanic is brilliant. It is not only awesome because you can turn it on and off whenever you feel like it, it is also wonderful because it only affects a single aspect of the game, the damage that you take from enemies. It does not change how much damage your character does to the enemies. It only affects how many hits you can take from your foes before you meet your demise. This toggled option creates a comfortable environment for players who want to focus on the rogue elements, instead of also worrying about Hades' difficulty. Celeste. The next two games are quite interesting. They are not unique because of their gameplay systems or the way in which they make their experience easier for the players. They stick out on this list because of their developers. Unlike From Software's president, who stands behind his game's difficulty, the team behind Celeste and the next title have acknowledged that a reach to a wider audience will not only help the overall quality of the product, but will also allow people who cannot deal with a certain section's difficulty to remove some of the weight that the title puts on their shoulders. Celeste is not an action game. Instead, its difficulty comes from extremely challenging platforming levels that make Rayman Legends stages a joke in comparison. Fortunately, Celeste includes a feature called Assist Mode. Similar to Hades, it is a toggled aspect on the options menu. If you choose to use it, you can change the game speed, remove the limits of your stamina and dashing, give your character invincibility, and completely skip levels. When asked about the inclusion of the Assist Mode, Matt Thorson, one of the game's developers, said the following: "From my perspective as the game's designer, Assist Mode breaks the game. I spent many hours fine-tuning the difficulty of Celeste, so it's easy for me to feel precious about my designs. But ultimately, we want to empower the player and give them a good experience, and sometimes that means letting go." Celeste has a mesmerizing soundtrack and a touching narrative about overcoming odds and depression, and it would have been a shame if I was stopped dead in my tracks from seeing the end of Celeste's journey because I could not pass a platforming section. I'm thankful that the developer implemented the Assist Mode, and I'm glad that more and more people are able to play one of the best indie titles ever made. Darkest Dungeon. The only game that I have not personally played, Darkest Dungeon is widely known as a very challenging title. The required strategy, the questionable configuration of enemies, and the general sense of dread through damage input and output are the reasons as to why I have owned Darkest Dungeon, but I have yet to give it a go. When asked about lessening the difficulty of their game, the developers created a blog post and said the following: "As many of you know, we have been reluctant to add difficulty-related options until now, because focusing on our intended version of the game has been our number one priority, and our experiments and changes during early access have all been in support of iterating on that. But it would be foolish for us not to consider the fact that the Darkest Dungeon community is now big enough to include diverse groups, some of which would like to play the game differently than we might have envisioned. As a result, they included a feature in the options menu called Darkest Dungeon Config, which allows you to turn certain aspects of the gameplay on and off. In addition, it also includes a difficulty setting, which describes the best and intended way to play, depending on your experience as a gamer. The matchup of a difficulty setting and Darkest Dungeon Config provides all of the tools that a player would need to personally customize the difficulty setting of their own playthrough. Suggestions such as changing the enemy AI, decreasing the speed of the combat, or taking away boss patterns would be a tad too much for From Software and its fans to accept. I do not want to see anything in terms of game design being taken away. Keep the same bosses and their patterns. Keep the same enemy locations. Keep the feature that your souls are gone when you die. Keep the stamina bar. Here are the only two aspects that I would like to change with an easy mode. Higher damage to enemies and lower damage to you. I'm not talking about transforming your character into a monster that one-shots every foe and does not take any damage. I'm talking about slightly increasing the damage to your opponents and slightly decreasing the damage done to you. That is all. As far as I'm concerned, I think it is a perfectly reasonable request for From Software. There are two more subtopics that I would like to discuss in this video. However, I would like to clear the air and bring up a question in regard to the assumption that an easy mode will change the developer's vision. The Souls genre revolves around games that are stressful yet rewarding. Another genre that can provide its own type of difficulty is the roguelike type of games. These titles are typically action-based and ask you to venture off on an adventure and defeat enemies. Once you die though, it is essentially game over. You lose most or all of your progress, and you must start from the very beginning. In 2021, Returnal was released on the PlayStation 5, and it was not only one of the best roguelike games for its time, but also one of the best PlayStation 5 exclusive titles. I am bringing up Returnal and its genre because one of the major complaints about the title is the lack of a manual save. If you wanted to play the game and make any kind of progress, you would need to save a good chunk of time in your day and practice until you either beat the game or get to the third biome. After several requests to the developers, Housemarque, they added the feature to manually save the game. It does not allow you to reload the save over and over before a boss fight, but it gives you the option to pause the game, do other non-gaming activities, and come back. The idea of difficulty is subjective. I have not been able to beat a single boss in Demon's Souls Remake or Dark Souls 2, but I managed to platinum Returnal. I understand that point. However, why is the added manual save okay to ask from Housemarque, but an appropriate difficulty setting is immediately a red flag to From Software and its fans? I thought that we are not meant to interfere with the developer's vision. I am sorry if I'm coming off as a troll. It is not my intention at all. However, I'm just not a fan of double standards. Anyway, I'm personally done with my plea for a difficulty setting and my list of criticisms about From Software games. While I still have some questions, they are not geared towards the titles themselves or the developers. Rather, they are aimed at 5 YouTubers who either defend or find fault with the difficult video game genre. Putting my upcoming thoughts to the side, I respect the opinions of the following content creators. As a matter of fact, I am subscribed to these gentlemen on YouTube, and I will include their videos in the description so you can see for yourselves that I am not taking anything out of context. Nevertheless, I'm not one of those friends that will tell you that you are always correct and you can do no wrong. I will tell you the truth, as comfortable or uncomfortable as it may be. Now, let's stop beating around the bush and we will start with a man that truly loves cucumbers and chicken.
Hi. You want to discuss some tech and gaming news, Carlos?
Skip it up and that up.
A channel that is primarily focused on tech-based overviews, gaming news, and conversations about drama. ReviewTechUSA places Rich at the helm, and he's generally entertaining. Prior to the clips that will be referenced here, Rich has advocated for the inclusion of an easy mode in From Software games. According to him, his idea of an easy mode will be similar to mine: better defense for the protagonist and more damage dealt to enemies. However, his playthrough of Elden Ring changed his mind, and now he accepts From Software's stance on difficulty settings. There are 3 specific clips that I would like to address with regards to ReviewTechUSA. The first of which focuses on the notion that basic role-playing progression is in fact the easy mode of Elden Ring.
Usually, this is the biggest thing, and here is the one that shocked me. I am not a huge open world guy. I feel a lot of times that games are made open world because they just want to fluff them up to justify the $70 price point. With a Souls game like Elden Ring, that's the easy mode. The game is still hard as hell, don't get me wrong, but if there's something you can't overcome, whether it be a boss, like for example, I couldn't overcome Margit the Fell Omen, there's a billion other things that you could do. You could just kill a bunch of enemies over and over again and learn how to block and parry, and you could learn the combat, and every time you kill an enemy you get more runes, and runes you could level up with, which you'll need to do. And you could just, the whole world is like a playground.
It is true that upgrading the stats of your character and acquiring better weapons and skills can potentially make your adventure a lot easier to undertake. However, I think that we need to differentiate that notion with an actual easy mode. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a role-playing game that has multiple difficulty settings. Let's say that you and I are starting a new game. I am playing on Death March mode, which is the title's hardest difficulty. You're playing on easy mode. Both of us reach level 10 and have the same exact pieces of equipment. If we go up against an enemy and we use the same tactics, I will do less damage than you. Why? It is because I'm playing on a harder difficulty setting than you. Rich is absolutely right about the negative correlation between the higher level of your character and the decrease in the difficulty, but it is not the same as the inclusion of an easy mode in the game. Let's continue to the second point, which highlights one of the best parts about Elden Ring.
I gotta ask you this, you've been playing it non-stop for days now. While you're playing the game, how many times do you come across something you haven't seen, like a cave or some sort of boss encounter or an enemy you haven't seen, or, it's like, it's non-stop in this game. It's non-stop.
Oh, that's exactly what happened. So I ended up beating Margit the Fell Omen, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go screw around, maybe get some more runes. So I went off to like the complete opposite side of the map, and there was a giant bear there. It was insane. And then I found some cave, and I knew I had no business being there. And I got lucky. I only died once, but the enemies were, granted I leveled up and got a more powerful sword at that point, but the enemies were pretty tough, but I survived. And it was just like, that's the thing about it too, is that it's rewarding. Even when you go to an area where you aren't supposed to be, just the thrill of like being there and surviving and getting through it, and you accrue ruins from killing these enemies, and that feel of, the best way to describe it is it's an enjoyable feel of dread. Meaning that in another open world, okay, you play a Far Cry game, what's going to happen? A bear is going to bite your nuts, and you're going to pump a buckshot in him with a shotgun, and the bear is dead. Here it's like you don't know what's going to happen next. There may be a pack of wolves that come out. There may be a giant. There's like literally this area where these multiple giants going around, and even if you're on horseback, because you do get a horse named Torrent, that they still may get you. And I haven't felt that sense of dread in a good way since I've been a kid. Like the last time I remember feeling something like that was not a kid, let's say Resident Evil 4, but I remember with the early Castlevania games where Castlevania 1, you're going there, those things that could crush you, and you're always like, if you even touch a pixel of them, you could die. And that's how it felt.
Although I will always hold these games' presentation to the highest regard, I 100% agree with Rich on this point here. The open world environments of Elden Ring encourage you to explore and find secrets that have yet to be discovered. I still hold by my stance that it is frustrating to discover an area or a boss for which you are clearly underleveled, but there is always something to do in Elden Ring, and there is always something to discover. If I was a fan of these games, I can see myself investing hours and hours with them. For now, let's keep going with Rich's third and final point, which caters back to the main reason as to why people love From Software games in the first place.
Every boss gives you that adrenaline rush, like you feel accomplished. When I beat Margit, I haven't felt a sense of accomplishment like that. The last time was when I actually finally beat Castlevania for the NES in 2019, and that's when I got to Dracula. And that Margit's the first main boss, so I have a hell of a way to go, even though I put a decent amount of hours into the game.
Yeah, doesn't it actually feel good to play this game? Like, a lot of people assume it's going to be a difficult thing to get into, but once you get over that bit of that hump of learning that, yeah, you can get new weapons and all these abilities, and then you're going to overcome by learning and dying, of course. Isn't it one of the best experiences in gaming that you've had forever? I mean, I have a story really quickly here. I could never tell you the name of the area on the map, but there was this, and maybe a minor spoiler warning here, but I came across this forest and these ruins, and there was this witch that was apparently living inside of this house. So the game is designed in a way where every second you're out there, there's an amazing encounter. So I'm coming up to this house, and I see all these like goblins outside. So I take out the goblins, and then this giant goblin comes out. I'm like, that must be the witch. You know, it's got some weird name. So I take it out, and I'm standing there, and I'm like, okay, that's the witch, right? No, it isn't the witch. I go through the ruins to look through more. All of a sudden, this giant witch comes out, and it's unreal. The game is unbelievable because it sets you up to believe that, yeah, you've accomplished something here, and it feels great, but just wait, because you're about to face something even more difficult.
My Twitch viewers can attest to the fact that the bosses in From Software games have caused me to look at my controller and gradually debate with myself as to whether or not it will be a good idea to spike it on the ground. However, I cannot deny that it felt good when I ultimately ended a foe's reign over the lands that From Software has created. The feeling was preceded with several instances of sadness, disappointment, and anger, but the sigh of relief after a boss's health completely depleted was definitely present. ReviewTechUSA's transition when it comes to his thoughts on an easy difficulty setting is done while providing recommendations for people who want an easier way to play these games. I may not necessarily agree with him, but I appreciate that he's doing so in a non-toxic manner.
What's up, everybody? Let's talk about your beloved Elden Ring.
Solidrev is quite an interesting character. He does not sugarcoat his opinions on video games, which is exactly why I respect and enjoy his content. His honesty applies to one of his most recent videos, which gives the impression that Elden Ring almost forced him to quit gaming. He does not say that From Software games are bad by any stretch of the imagination. Neither do I. Nevertheless, he made 3 interesting statements that I would like to address here. We will kick things off with his annoyance over the title's navigation system.
So I continue on with the game, and I got no clue where to go. I'm struggling, I'm trying to figure out where to go, and I know a lot of you guys like that aspect. You like that you don't know where to go. People, I don't have this kind of time, okay? I have GPS for a reason. I hate to be lost in the real world. Why the hell do I want to be lost in a game where I'm trying to enjoy myself and have fun?
Solidrev is right. I know that you can use the Sites of Grace to get hints as to the next main location, but I cannot tell you how many times I cluelessly ventured off the beaten path. In most role-playing games, you can explore the world to your heart's content, while knowing full well that there is a marked point on the map that tells you how to advance the title's story. It is not a huge deal because the Sites of Grace are better than nothing, but I do not think that it would ruin the experience if the traditional main story marker on the map was added to Elden Ring or upcoming From Software games that have an open world structure. This issue does not impact the previous titles in the series because they are linear by nature, but it is certainly an inconvenience in Elden Ring. Solidrev's second point does not give me a choice but to scratch my head over the logic behind bosses' damage output in specific situations.
And I hit I got to this giant. It reminds me of Ares. He reminds me of Ares from God of War. That's who this big ass giant reminds me of. My vigor is like up to like 45, crazy number, and just absolutely decimates me with one hit. I may have been a little weak, like I may have had a little health gone, but he hits me one time through some crazy attack that I thought I dodged. I'm dead. I'm this high ass level. I'm still getting slapped with one shot.
This complaint is null and void if you do not properly upgrade your character's stats. However, Solidrev's experience is a crystal clear piece of evidence that From Software games can be infuriating at times. Think about 2 characters with the same pieces of equipment. One has a small bar of health, the other has a larger one. Why does it take the same amount of hits to kill both characters? In my mind, it should take a longer amount of time to kill the latter than the former. It pushes me away from ever investing experience points on Vitality. I do not blame Solidrev for being aggravated at this predicament. The last point is a personal one, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it.
If all I'm going to do is get pissed off when I play a game, I don't want to play it.
There is no question that these games are beatable. Nonetheless, I'm not willing to die over and over again to beat a boss, and repeat the same process over and over again. As far as I'm concerned, gaming is a hobby that I enjoy because it is fun and relaxing. Do not take that statement in face value. It does not mean that I only like titles such as Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing. I love Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. I love DMC Devil May Cry, contrary to the popular opinion. I love Super Meat Boy. There are a lot of challenging games that I enjoy and have beaten. The difference between all of the games that I mentioned and From Software titles is that I'm having a good time with the former picks for a good portion of my playthrough. The only sense of fun that I get from Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, and Dark Souls is whenever I beat a boss, which rarely happens. At this point, we will switch from someone who is not necessarily a die-hard fan of Elden Ring to someone who is clearly an avid fan of it and the catalog of similar games as a whole.
Video games should be more accessible. Dark Souls needs an easy mode. No, it doesn't. Get good.
You may have heard about the next content creator from his interactions with YouTube and Quantum TV. The Actman is an individual who creates videos with an excellent level of quality, and his popular video about how an easy mode would ruin Dark Souls is nicely edited and very well spoken. Sadly, this specific video is accompanied by several statements with which I wholeheartedly disagree. I stated earlier that I respect the content creators that are featured in this video, and it is still the case, but I will be honest. The Actman's comments about the possible easy mode in From Software games will receive feedback that is primarily critical. Let's see what is in store with the Actman's thoughts on the difficulty setting in those challenging video games.
A Souls game without the difficulty might as well be a racing game without the racing.
The title of his video clearly tells the audience that the Actman does not want an easy mode in From Software games. However, it is not a justification for a comparison that, in my opinion, does not make any sort of sense. There are hundreds of action role-playing games that include a difficulty setting. If the option was taken away from those titles, nothing about the title structures, gameplay mechanics, story, or enemy placements would change. If you eliminate the opportunity to race from a racing game, it essentially transforms the title into a PowerPoint presentation with cars. A racing game without the racing is like a sports game without, the sports. A difficulty setting in a From Software game would not nearly be as detrimental to the overall experience as taking away racing from a racing game or sports from a sports game. That comparison is just illogical, with all due respect. The Actman's second point could have been unintentional, but it is something that I noticed when I rewatched the following clip for the purpose of research.
Should the Souls games have an easy mode or accessibility features? The short answer is no.
My only question here is as follows. Why would you not want accessibility options in From Software games? Earlier in this video, the Actman distinguishes the concepts of accessibility and difficulty. I concur that these two ideas should be separated. They are not the same. I understand why he would not want an easy mode in these titles, but what about accessibility options? What about features that will allow people who physically or mentally cannot play From Software's catalog under their current designs to experience what makes Dark Souls, Sekiro, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, and Demon Souls special for many people? The Actman goes back to his point later in the video and okays the inclusion of accessibility options, but it is the recent clip that surprised me to a certain extent. The next point is a general assumption, and even though I am guilty of making them from time to time, I still believe that general assumptions are dangerous because they either do not apply to every aspect of your target, or they are claimed without possible proof.
Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and Elden Ring. None of these titles have ever needed or would be better off with an easy mode.
How would he know? How would the Actman know that none of the games ever needed or would be better off without an easy mode? It is impossible to know in the context of From Software because none of their games have had an easy mode. Imagine if I asked you to eat a banana with mustard, and you respond by saying, "No thank you, I would not like it." If you like bananas and mustard, I would say, how would you know? How would you know if you have not tried it? If the next From Software game has a difficulty setting and unquestionably ruins the experience for the Actman, then you can come back and make the statement. At this point in time, it is simply an unproven general statement. Speaking of assumptions, here is another one by the Actman.
And you know the old phrase, get good? While mostly used in a trolley sense, it actually has some truth here. Learn the mechanics of the game. Understand how you can make your life easier. No matter my previous experience with From Software titles, every time a new one drops, I think I'm hot shit and I get my ass kicked like everybody else. It's about effort. People want to be rewarded for doing as little as possible.
That last part. People want to be rewarded for doing as little as possible. When gamers ask for an easy mode in From Software games, they are not asking for a mode that you toggle and get the ability to kill everyone with a single hit. Nobody's asking for it. That would be a case of feeling like we should be rewarded for doing as little as possible. In my version of an easy mode, all I want is a decrease of damage done to me and an increase of damage done to the enemies. That is it. You can still have a challenging video game with a difficulty setting, and one that does not give you the keys to the end of the game without any work whatsoever. An easy mode may be a cakewalk for the Actman, but it may be the perfect balance of difficulty and fairness for folks who do not want to spend hours and hours while memorizing a boss's pattern and intentionally raising their blood pressure. Again, it is an assumption by the Actman. Regrettably, his most questionable take is reserved for the last clip. It is an extensive clip where the Actman goes into depth as to how, in his opinion, an easy mode will be incorporated into a From Software game. I will address everything at the end in a concise manner, but I want to play the entire section so you will understand why the Actman's suggestion is an illogical over-exaggeration and one that is made because he does not want an easy mode in these games. Let's begin.
But okay, how would an easy mode work? Let's think about this, because now we have to completely change every aspect of the game, which poses new challenges for the developers. So, you know how Call of Duty used to have a playlist called Boot Camp where only people like level 10 and under could play in it? Well, they ended up scrapping that in later games because too many people would go in on Smurf accounts and just completely ruin the experience. What's stopping people from twinking, smurfing, and invading players in easy mode? Just get rid of the PvP and then there's no problem. Really? You want to toss out the entire multiplayer component? You see how the easy mode is just cutting out content from the game itself? Like, what the fuck is the point of Solaire now? Now we have to change the story and Solaire's role in it in the easy mode. I would say here's a white soapstone, go join up in jolly cooperation, but you picked easy mode, and you're a little bitch. Okay, you say, well let's keep the jolly cooperation but prevent hostile invaders. Alright, well, now you've just separated the player base to appease a group of people who can't be fucked to learn the game's mechanics in the first place. So you might as well just play in offline mode if that's the case. Oh hey, you mind telling me how covenants are gonna work now? Because those are relying on PvP. You talk about how much you want to experience the story, but now we're cutting chunks of that out too. So now we're in a situation where you either cut out the PvP entirely or you keep it and you let people in the easy mode get absolutely destroyed. It's apparent to anyone who's actually played these games that if you sit down and try to think through the logistics of an easy mode, in 5 minutes you should realize what an absolute disaster it would be. And let's say you have an easy mode, what happens when a player's like, damn, turns out this is too easy? You gonna give people the option to change difficulties mid-playthrough? I don't think so. Guess that guy's gotta restart. So let's say FromSoft wants to go back and reprogram Dark Souls with an easy mode. Those two archers in Anne Orlando, what do we do with them? Lower the knockback on the arrows? Probably get rid of them entirely. How do you make the Bed of Chaos easier? Go back and program it not to attack as much? Maybe keep the tiles from falling? Alright, what about these wheelie bastards? Well, you can't just lower their damage, you gotta make them stun less. What about items and locations that aren't easy to find? You want new players to find these things too, right? We gonna put down a sign in Firelink that says, hey, go sit in the nest for 15 seconds? I could give you 20 minutes worth of examples. Asking for an easy mode is basically asking From Software to make two separate games, because changing numbers doesn't change the mechanics.
I will keep my thoughts short and sweet. 1. Nobody's asking for the removal of features or enemy placements. 2. The possibility of a veteran player invading a novice player already exists in these games. Adding an easy mode will not change it. If you want to stop newcomers from being invaded, you can restrict people who play on easy mode to only play offline. Problem solved. 3. If the easy mode only changes the damage done to you and the damage done to enemies, which is nothing more than numerical values, you can easily allow players to change the difficulty on the fly. And 4. If there are story elements that are only accessible through online play, I promise you that the folks who want an easy mode will gladly sacrifice those handful bits of story to gain access to an easy mode. I know that the Ackman comes from a good place, and he wants to protect the essence and identity of From Software, but his complete neglect of any form of an easy mode is showcased through unreasonable expectations and mind-boggling comparisons. I think that we talked enough about the Ackman. Let's move on to the next YouTuber.
Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and getting good!
I love SomeOrdinaryGamers and his content. His videos are sprinkled with a nice balance of seriousness and humor. Closer to Elden Ring's release, he uploaded a video that addressed a common question about the Souls games and, more specifically, Elden Ring. The title is, Should Elden Ring have an easy mode? While he does not side with either camp at first, his answer is clear by the end of his video. No, it should not have an easy mode. Let's explore his reasonings, and we will start with a general comment that, at this point, is straight up factual.
But because it's the most popular game and it's the most accessible ones, I've seen takes like this. I'm so damn tired of the get good discourse. Your experience isn't affected one iota by the presence of difficulty slider. Games are too damn expensive to make them solely for the niche, masochistic audience. Now, this is where I beg to differ. Obviously, this is not a niche game, given the fact that so many people have bought this title. The fact that it's a bigger sales week than Call of Duty Vanguard and things like that, Elden Ring is not a niche anymore. From Software titles are not a niche any longer. This is something that's very much becoming the mainstream.
Prior to the release of Bloodborne, I would agree that From Software's games were catered to a niche audience. However, it is Bloodborne's launch day that started the transition of the community into the mainstream. As SomeOrdinaryGamers says, Elden Ring has sold more copies than Call of Duty Vanguard in a particular week. It is safe to say that the community is no longer niche. It is a major player in the mainstream. The next point is a hypothetical suggestion by SomeOrdinaryGamers about a toggled option as part of an attempt to make Elden Ring more accessible.
The only accessibility mode I can honestly conceive that would make this game easier or more accessible to people is if you added a feature to slow down time, thus allowing you to parry better or dodge easier or whatnot. Now, to understand, this would make the game dramatically easier if you could do that. And I think if this gameplay feature, accessibility feature is what people are asking for mostly, then it's something that I would never enable. But if somebody who had some physical impairments or somebody that wasn't quick at reacting for whatever medical reason or just any reason in general, this would be a feature they could enable for themselves. I don't think I'd be against that at all.
The ability to slow down time to provide a better chance of parrying enemy attacks will help individuals with physical or mental disabilities who could benefit from it. And I think that its addition as a toggled feature in the options menu would work. Needless to say, I also think that the suggestion of slowing down time as part of an easy mode is a far reach. This accessibility option will obviously slow down the enemy's movements, but it will keep your movement at the typical pace. It will be an incredibly difficult feature to implement because you have to make sure that the animations correspond to the different speeds and guarantee that some monsters who are already slow due to their size or behavior are not slowed down to the point where they are no longer menacing. This accessibility option could work, but you must be very careful with it. The next clip is one of two moments where SomeOrdinaryGamers and I do not come to an agreement.
Now, when you talk about gameplay difficulty, it's not as if a difficulty slider in these games would even matter if it was just changing damage values. Really, if you were to implement a difficulty slider in these games, you would have to basically make it so that if you were to fight a boss and set the game to easy mode, then the boss would only have 2 out of their 4, attack patterns in the repertoire. Versus if you go to normal difficulty or even a harder mode, then the boss would be like From Software intended. Basically, you're forcing From to nerf their game design, their artistic vision, to make the game easier for everyone to play.
I disagree with SomeOrdinaryGamers. An easy mode does not have to take away patterns from a boss fight. Most role-playing or action titles do not remove patterns from boss fights if you switch from a higher difficulty setting to the featured easy mode. An example would be the original Dead Space. It is true that the final boss only has a handful of patterns, but he has the same set of moves across the various difficulty settings. The next point is intriguing because it is true in some situations, but false in others.
Let's say at level 30, if you're getting your ass kicked by Margit, then you can grind, fight other enemies, explore the open world, and by the time you're level 50, 55, Margit becomes a joke. And that's the same thing that could be said for any battle.
It depends on how well versed you are when it comes to upgrading your stats. From Software fans know how to adequately use their souls to create a character that would destroy Margit at level 55. A newcomer Maybe or maybe not. He or she may attempt to spend souls on every stat, and if that happens, Margit will still pose a challenge at level 55. Some ordinary gamers is correct, but it only applies if you know what you're doing. The last clip reminds me of the Act-Man in the sense that it is a comparison that I personally would not make.
I understand wanting to have a game be a little more accessible, but when you're talking about making a game that's historically known for being challenging from a developer that makes challenging titles, and all of a sudden telling them to create an arbitrary easy mode that literally just changes the entire structure of a game, changes the entire flow of a game that's also connected to a multiplayer component with tons of people coming around and joining this challenge together, I think that's a little bit out there to ask for. I think when you tell them to put an easy mode into something like Elden Ring, it's almost like telling somebody who's making a simulator racing game to all of a sudden add the most easy assist, make the game as easy to play as, you know, Mario Kart or Need for Speed, if you will, right? Like, there are certain genres for certain types of players.
I do not mean to beat a dead horse, but a request for an easy mode does not include a stipulation that the entire genre or subgenre must change. Implementing a difficulty setting is a lot different and a lot easier than taking Microsoft Flight Simulator and change it to play like Ace Combat 7. At that point, you are switching genres or subgenres. An easy mode does not do it, as long as it is done correctly. I would only want to change to the damage done to the protagonist and the damage done to the enemies. I do not think that would change the whole genre. We have one more YouTube content creator to discuss, and I decided to include him because his video is remarkable, even if we do not see eye to eye.
Difficulty in video games is a controversial subject.
I came across this last content creator when I was researching YouTube videos for my own YouTube video. I will not pretend and say that I'm a long-time viewer of this individual because, quite frankly, I've never heard about him prior to making this video essay. Thankfully, I'm glad that I discovered him. We share some disagreements, sure, but his mannerism and the way in which he articulates himself are superb. The clips that we are going to analyze come from a video with the following title: All the Reasons Why Some Games Should Not Have an Easy Mode. I recommend that you watch this video in its entirety, but at the moment we will only tackle 3 short clips. Ratatosk's first point focuses on whether or not these games are actually difficult.
The reason that people advocate easy modes is because they're worried that some people will be unable to handle that difficulty. But the problem is that, despite their reputation, most of the games brought up in these discussions are not brutally difficult. The Dark Souls and Outwards of the world are not reflex games. They aren't skill-based. They're about patience and experience. Their appeal comes from the process of learning how not to suck. And that process is balanced for the average person. With practice, even a very bad player can clear Dark Souls. It doesn't require talent.
There are 2 points on which I need to comment. For one, difficulty, as I already said, is subjective. If you're going to say something along the lines of, this game isn't hard, or this game does not require skill, I behoove you to add the following phrase: for me. This game is not hard for me. This game does not require skill from me. What may be challenging for you can be a non-issue for others. I do not know how to ride a bicycle in real life. I took off the training wheels when I was 10 years old, and I never learned how to ride without them. If I try to gain that skill now, I will have to practice for a while. If you know how to ride a bicycle, chances are that it is second nature for you. The other point that Ratatoskr makes is how a terrible player can succeed in these games with enough practice. He is correct, but then a question presents itself to the player. Are you willing to spend hours of stress-inducing battles for the prideful gift of being able to say, I beat this boss? If yes, go for it. I, for one, cannot put my time, money, and most importantly, mental health on the line for mere bragging rights. The concluding 2 points in this section of this video are brought up in Ratataskr's video, but they are not made by him. They were mentioned in a conference where Dark Souls was being compared to IKEA.
So let's think of the target audience for Dark Souls. A hardcore gamer, enjoys discovery, likes pushing the boulder up the hill like Sisyphus, wants depth, and wants thrilling, menacing experiences. These are gamers who want games that are like badges of honor if they win.
I want to focus on the last part of that clip. The target audience wants to feel like they have earned a badge of honor for their accomplishments. It is definitely an achievement whenever you beat a boss in a From Software game, let alone beat the whole game. Interestingly enough, That statement gave me an idea for the discussion about an easy mode. Take a look at Cuphead. Aside from being one of the best indie titles ever made, it is a challenging platformer that requires precision when it comes to your timing of offensive and defensive movements. It includes a difficulty setting, ranging from simple, regular, and expert. The regular setting is how the game is intended to be played. The expert difficulty adds more health and more attacks to the bosses. The simple difficulty is a special case. It takes away certain offensive patterns and lowers the enemy's health, but it also blocks you from finishing the game. In order to take on the last island and come face to face with the final boss, you must beat all of the previous bosses on the regular difficulty setting. A similar solution can be implemented in the From Software games. Include the easy mode, but do not allow players to earn any boss-related trophies and achievements. If they want those badges of honor, they must play the game on the intended difficulty by the developers. This answer also addresses the Actman's assumption that people who advocate for an easy mode want everything to be given to them on a silver platter. If they want those trophies and achievements, they need to put in the work. To conclude, let us address the final point that I would like to tackle, based on other content creators on YouTube.
Sparse music cuts costs, but it also makes the world of Dark Souls feel far more sparse and desolate and menacing. So it's a cut that made it better. This is the essence of a competitive advantage. Limited multiplayer is focused multiplayer. And the fact that they're reusing the tech from Dark Souls reduces some of their unknowns. Known tech, experienced tech is known tech, is predictable tech, relatively speaking.
I've always been under the impression that certain companies receive less flack than others for committing shady practices. When Rockstar releases Grand Theft Auto 5 on 3 different generations of consoles, there are gamers who give them a pass because it's Rockstar. When Nintendo releases the Super Mario 3D All-Stars within a specific time period and removes it from the online stores afterwards, eyebrows were raised, but the issue was quickly forgotten. From Software also follows a path that could be considered as questionable. It is not a big deal because the focus of From Software games has never been about the visual fidelity, but it is still a nuisance. I will include a video in the description that compares the animations between Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and Elden Ring. Dark Souls 1 was released in 2011. Elden Ring was released this year. The fact that some of the animations from Dark Souls 1 exists in Elden Ring 11 years after Dark Souls' release is something that is worthy of criticism. It is not an end-of-the-world scenario for From Software, and I do not talk smack about journalists who do not point out this coincidence, but it is a piece of contention that I at least wanted to mention here. The final piece of criticism has been saved for the most important target, the From Software fans. I realize that the good majority of them respectfully voice their opinions and do everything in their power to encourage newcomers to give their games a try. Alas, their community includes a vocal minority that discourages certain playstyles, clowns struggling gamers, and treat From Software as a religion. Although these people will most likely be the ones that will downvote this video without reaching this point of their argumentation, the following points are primarily aimed at them. I am all in favor of criticism because it can highlight areas where you can improve yourself. If you have learned how to play a sport, a musical instrument, or a card game from someone who is a veteran, there's a chance that he or she gave you some tips on how to become a better player. It happened to me when I learned how to play the guitar for the very first time. I could not play barred chords, until my teacher said that I should use my thumb to push from the back of the guitar neck. It helped me a lot and I improved my skills as a guitar player. There is always room for criticism. However, I'm more likely to hear and use your criticism when you have a good intention and you voice it in a respectful tone. If your criticism belittles me for calling out the game's fault in a non-toxic way, then I will not seriously acknowledge you. A while ago I posted a clip from Elden Ring on my Twitter account. I did not praise the game, I did not say anything negative about it. I only posted the clip and said that I will use it in this video. Look at the comment section. Notice how I did not respond to any of them. I simply thanked them for proving my point in this section of the video. It is okay to love something and criticize it at the same time. My favorite game of all time is Telltale The Walking Dead due to its exceptional storytelling, lovable characters, and memorable soundtrack. However, I can attest to the fact that ultimately, it is a walking simulator with dialogue options and QuickTime events. I still adore it, but it is not perfect. A perfect game does not exist in my opinion, which is a good thing because it means that there is always room for improvement and there is always an opportunity to make an even better product than the one that's not utter perfection. If you come to me and say that you do not like Telltale's The Walking Dead, I'm going to tell you that I disagree, but I will be glad to have a conversation with you and hear you out. There is one more comment that I need to address about the From Software community. If you have ever been exposed to the company's titles, I'm sure that you have heard the following phrase at some point: get good. The get good argument has been used for trolling, but it has also been used by people who are serious. Personally, I think it is a weak argument. Imagine when you were a student at school. Let's say that you were learning how to find missing angles in a geometry class. Imagine if you came to your teacher, said that you do not understand how to find missing angles, and all your teacher said is, study. At that point, I would think that you would ask yourself, what should I study? How should I study? If I was in the student's shoes, I would be taken aback from doing anything because I would not understand how to study or what to study, nor would I think that the one who provided feedback, in this case the teacher, really cares if I succeed or not. If you're one of those players who says get good, here is my suggestion. Instead of saying get good, teach the novice player about strategies that can help him or her have a better experience with From Software's titles. Your encouragement could help the player enjoy these hard games to a certain extent. You will come across as a positive influencer, and you may convince him or her that your beloved franchise may have something to offer after all. The From Software genre is one that was initially geared towards a niche audience, but has now become a major player in the video game industry. As it stands right now, I'll be very surprised if any other game besides Elden Ring wins the Game of the Year award at this year's Game Awards. At the end of the day, Elden Ring and its predecessors are not for me. If these games had a toggle difficulty option and a narrative that did not require you to use Google to get the most out of it, I would probably be a fan of Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Demon Souls, and Elden Ring. At this point in time though, I can only sit back and acknowledge an absolute truth. From Software games are simply not for me. Well folks, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for checking it out. What are your thoughts about From Software's games? What makes them appealing to you? Why are you keeping your distance from them? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As it is a sensitive topic due to the troll-based vocal minority, I would appreciate it if you were respectful with your comments, whether you agree or disagree with me. Till next time, have a great day or evening wherever you are. My name is AS, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.